Next up, we've got Nick from OceansHQ, who's going to talk to us about preparing for a natural disaster using bots.
So, just before I get cracking on, can everybody at the back hear me all right? People in the back row? Awesome. It's a good check because I don't want you to not be able to hear me. Just a moment, having a slight fight with my mouse. And I have a clicker. All right, that's only 30 seconds gone. Okay, my name is Nick. I'm going to be talking to you today, again with the first slide, about preparing for a natural disaster using Ruby and Twilio. And before I get started, I just want to kind of go through the order of the day so you know what to expect from my talk, just a brief outline. So the first, I'm going to cover a critical problem that I think we're uniquely aware of as devs, whether it's mobile or web application or anything that's connected to a network, but really affects just about everyone, as we learned in the keynote this morning. In the United Kingdom and the world are about 4 billion of us. The second thing I'm going to do is discuss tackling that problem, actually working through a product build using Ruby and Twilio. I have a little meat emoji there because that's kind of the meat of the talk. That's the fun bit. That's what I'm here to do. And the third thing I'm going to do is cover the outcomes and retrospectives from this process and this build and kind of what we're going to do moving forward on this project. So before we begin, I'd like to say who I am. Clearly, I'm not Devonian or Cornish. I'm not from this neck of the woods. I grew up in Superior, Montana, in Mineral County. Mineral County is about the size of Cornwall, only had about 3,000 people. I lived in the biggest town in the county seat, which had 700 people. And this is me, quite different climate. This is me in July, top of the mountain. As you can see, it's probably about 35 degrees, but we still got snow melting up there. It's really nice to just grab some snow when you're absolutely broiling. But I don't live there anymore. Now I live in Schwaderer in beautiful Cornwall. Great town. It has the benefits of not being absolutely annihilated with the tourism in the summer, but having enough for industry. It has an actual train stop in the middle of town, unlike my former town, Bodmin. It has half a dozen lovely pubs that you'll actually be recognized when you go in. I've gone enough. I don't sound like a holiday maker anymore. And people who actually like being where they are. And I've lived in a few places that people don't like being in the town they're in. I came there by way of the Plymouth University. I went here 2009 to 2012 before I crossed onto the other side of the river. And now I work for a company called OceansHQ. What OceansHQ do are provide a series of SaaS products. I work as a software engineer there, and we procure exclusively to national governments. I believe we have 9 at the minute, including the United Kingdom, for vessel registry. So if you have an oil tanker or a cruise ship or a pleasure yacht that is massive, or most any commercial ships on the planet, you have to flag or register with the national government. We write the software that lets you do that and also manage seafarers. However, today's talk has nothing to do about where I work. So if you want to talk about procurement for national governments, which could be its own talk, or talk about the ins and outs of ship registry and the laws of the high seas, grab a beer with me later. I'd love to talk to you about it. But one of the fun things about doing talks that have nothing to do about your job is there's no NDAs. I'm not going to sign an NDA against myself, right? So I can talk about absolutely anything and not worry that I'm going to, harm the company. So let's move away from my background and go into our main issue here. So I believe there are some massive problems waiting to happen, and it really kind of just makes me think about Ruby's wonderful talk this morning about the digital age and the networks that we all sit on, and how we've kind of, in all of our lifetimes, no matter how the youngest person in this room, have changed the way that we behave every single day, and it has a massive fault in it. I'm sure we have O2 customers in here. I'm an O2 customer, and you probably remember the outage last year. Not the little outages that happen every couple months where something's down for an afternoon, but the mega outage. Everyone was down. If you had O2, you did not have 4G. And after this happened, which was really annoying even though I didn't have any critical failures because of it, I think within a day or two, everyone kind of forgot about it. And the massive inconvenience and risk that was brought into our lives. But I was still thinking about it because as a developer, if I write any web apps or mobile applications, I rely on that communication. And I thought this is a massive risk. So when did my reliance on 4G or a data network first come into my life? I didn't own a smartphone, even as a techie person, until very end of 2012. So before that, my interactions with other humans besides voice and in person would have been SMS, would have been voice over the phone, or in a building on a laptop, right? That was the old way. You'd go in and you'd get on your laptop and you'd write your email, you'd look at your Facebook, you'd look at Twitter, but you'd do it on a machine. But now we all have one right here, and I'm going to check and make sure it's not going to ring. We have devices on us that we now rely on. We do not prepare before we go out. We don't print off maps on our little printer in our house before we have to go to a location. We just expect this delivery of service. So just think of the inconvenience on a simple level first. I live in Cornwall. I almost exclusively would use Google Maps with data. I mean, I wouldn't, sit and put it in my house and try and save it to offline mode. So that's exclusively on data. What if I was in London about to meet with a client, and I was out and about, and I needed to find the address that's in my email that I don't remember? What if I needed to communicate with someone that I didn't have an SMS-style number communication with, Telegram or something, or all the WhatsApp, or all these other applications that we rely upon? What if I had to check in for a flight? And some of them nowadays, I don't know about all, but I got nailed the other day. Wiz didn't check in online. It was 40 quid to check in the airport. Right? These are real things that can get you, because we've now organized a society where we all lay on top of the backbone of the data network, currently 4G, and don't really think about the redundancy or plan or prepare for when it goes down. We do a lot of talk about if electricity goes down. You hear about off-grid people all the time with their generators and their solar panels. We really don't talk about data going down. Let me ratchet this up a little further. Natural disasters. Actually, I think a better term for this topic would be national disasters, because this is going to cover things that aren't just caused by nature. So, your earthquakes, your hurricanes, your forest fires, your tornadoes. I'm just talking about the ones we had in America. But also you could have, we still live in a world where there's war and terrorism and misery and attacks and invasions, even in the 21st century. That's also a similar type of disaster. So these are things that are very likely to bring down networks and connectivity. But what do they all have in common? They are times when people need it more than ever. It's not about checking your Reddit or your Twitter feed or how to get to the pub, right? This is where you need to contact your loved ones and be able to be in touch, but you don't have it. So what can we do with this kind of test case study to try and improve that connectivity for people? This article is from 2011. I think this problem has been written about since actually well before we even had data about network accessibility. I remember, in 9/11, phones went down even if they weren't hit by the attack, because everybody's using it. So it's not even about the attack, it's about everybody's trying to get contact at the same time, and that will bring networks down because they're going to a level of bandwidth and need that is not foreseeable. You couldn't build the infrastructure to handle it. This is a snippet from that article. One thing that we know with the 3 tiers, voice, SMS, and data, SMS has the least hit on the network. It is the narrowest point that has the least impact if you're trying to get communication from A to B. Another article. And the other interesting feature with SMS to this day, because we still think of it as almost kind of an old email-y technology, but it can be stored. If I'm trying to execute voice communication with someone in this room, that's a live and real-time communication that needs an entire complete pipeline to work, to be able to have a back and forth. With SMS, it's just one communication going out. If it makes it partway through the pipeline, it can be stored and sent later. So you might be able to have back and forth communication even if there's a few seconds or a few minutes delay in between, because it can be stored and sent. So let's go into part 2. We've talked about the problem and the potential possibilities with SMS being our little lifeline into the real world when everything's down. Solving this problem with Ruby and Twilio. So what's a bot or a chatbot? I think everyone in this room is going to be clued up on this, but colloquially in culture, people think of bots as these little AI sentient things wriggling around and interacting with things, and same with chatbots, which is the better term in this case. But all a chatbot is an interface for you to talk to a server that is in and it is out, right? So you send it text, you get text back. It's a little fancy with some things now, like Telegram's API is pretty good. It allows you to send buttons and widgets back, but generally, especially with the focus here with SMS, it is text in, server does stuff, accesses the other world, text comes back. I have a little bit of history building a few of these for personal projects that I've used and never shared with the world. The first is called Schwaderer. I'm okay at naming and programming, not great at naming for products. So I just take the noun and put Schwad, which is my GitHub handle, in front of whatever I build, so that's Schwad Budget. You can guess what it is. It's my budgeting application. So we log on to a web app for 10 minutes a month. My wife and I have been using it for 2 years, and we organize our finances into line items. So that'd be like your rent, your phone bill, things that are known costs. And then you take your unknown fuzzy costs like pub or social, home, travel, and then you put a budget along those. You log out, and then you interact with a phone number via SMS to log your spendings on those expenses. But that's an SMS interface, right? That's something going in with its own protocol that you decide yourself. This is pot, comma, amount, comma, personal memo. You build your own protocol. The second one that I constructed about a year or so ago was Marbot. This one was actually on Telegram technology. I'll be brief because I've spoken about this before. But my wife's surgeon had said that it wasn't a wives' tale, because you hear about this as a kid, but that there is some correlative science behind barometric pressure fluctuations and chronic pain experiences. So while she was gearing up for some surgeries, we actually wanted to test this and track this, so we set up a bot that would randomly notify her 5 times a day, get a pain reading from her, track her exact location right there, hook into Weather Underground, get the barometric pressure at that time, marry them together, then at the end run it through some machine learning AI algorithms, and we were able to get up to about 86% accuracy on forecasting pain from there. So we now know that I have this experience building chatbots. How can we do it to tackle this problem? What is the fundamental problem we have? And you can probably already put it together. I cannot get in touch with the real world in particular times. The time that we're most worried about is natural disasters, whereas the natural disaster might take down the network, or to repeat, people using the network in great excess might take down the network. So we've determined that the best tool to do this is SMS, where I, as a programmer, have the functionality that I can take in text, and then I can process it with something that does access the real world, and then send text back. So let's pull this together. Who in this room has worked with Twilio before? All right, okay, a fair few people. So for those who don't know, Twilio is a pretty handy service. It's one of those ones that if you coded it all, you could get up to speed within about 10 minutes. It's one of many that allows you to interact with SMS and voice programmatically, and we're just going to start through this right now. So you just set up your account. If you want to be able to take texts in, you'd and send them out. You purchase a phone number. It's about $1 a month, and that becomes your interface point. you'd get your account SID and auth token and configure them within your application. And then within a couple lines of code and just a number that you're specified to send it to, obviously we do this dynamically, this is just examples, you are sending text out. So in very short order, you now have the ability from your app server or wherever, your console, to be sending text to people in any way you want. In fact, I built one a couple weeks ago to check Harry Potter tickets for my wife. It's pretty straightforward. The uses are endless for this. And then you put it inside your application. I've done this with a simple call method, which takes in an argument, and it sends the text out to whoever. That is my real phone number, so there you go. Obviously, so as we progress with this isn't going to be just for me, so it's going to be for anyone. So that's going to be dynamic, but this is just iteration 1. Now, if you want to be able to take messages in, how do you set that up? I'm sure a fair few in this room are familiar with webhooks. It's just a webhook setup. You have a server out in the real world that you set up an endpoint to, and then so this is me setting it up there, plugging it into, this is with an ngrok tunnel in development, plugging it into Twilio's dashboard, saying here's where the endpoint is. So when you send a text to that phone number, Twilio's then able to say, all right, I'll just pass it as a RESTful request, post request over here, and you do whatever you want with it. So I'll be able to catch it on my server and say, all right, somebody sent this to me from this phone number. What do I have to do? So voila, we are now able together to take in a text and to send a text back to that number. Anything that you can do, any power that you have in and by the way, Twilio, this is Ruby based. Any programming language that anyone knows in this room is heavily going to be supported on Twilio. They have wonderful documentation on anything. I don't even give links because you just Google your language in Twilio and you'll have it in about 5 seconds. So now what do we want to do? I want to start bringing these services in that people might want in a natural disaster. And the first one that I think you wouldn't use as often, but would be the most critical use case if everything has gone down, is checking the news. Because if an earthquake's happened and part of the country's gone into the sea, if there's invading forces, if the government's trying to get information out to the people, you don't even have your radio that you can turn on, this is the thing that you're going to want straight away. I integrated with the News API, which I'd never worked with before, and it was an absolute joy to work with. It's got a tremendous number of sources that you can pull in requests, and obviously it goes very, very deep on its capabilities, but it's also very straightforward if you want to use it for the simple use case. And in this case, I wanted to have my protocol be very simple. I wanted the first argument from the text, the one word, to be news. And then I wanted it to give 5 British headlines. The headline, the source, and the description of the headline for people. I wanted it to be shuffleable so that you could keep checking more and more headlines. Second, I wanted to be able to take in an optional parameter, so go news, comma, optional parameter, if you wanted to search for something. So if something went down in Cornwall specifically, and you wanted to see what are they saying about Cornwall? Because possibly World Cup's on, and all they're talking about is football. Like Cornwall's going into the sea, so you go news, comma Cornwall, and then you're able to see. Yes, Cornwall's independence fight is a bit shaky, but we'll see how it goes. So you put this together. I'll talk about the interactor pattern in a moment, but I keep this very simple. Everything within its own class in one call method, and very, very long lines. And then I wrap it within news. As you see there, I'm checking when things come in. Is there a second command? If not, do the British headlines. If so, do the queried headlines and then process the text to be sent out. And here is it in real life. You wouldn't search for Prince Philip. But just as a test, and I screenshot it. Okay, so you have a so what do we have before we do any more services? Think architecture and UX here, because SMS is very tricky, right? You don't have your beautiful green buttons and your pop-ups and your modals and your flashes and your alerts and all these things. You just have text. So you have to think about UX even harder than usual because you have a line of text coming through. What do we have? We have a happy path. Okay, before we do any services, we need to do the bad and sad path. So first, for the bad path is if something went wrong. So if somebody sends a text in and we can't find any match for what they've sent in, it just doesn't work. We don't have anything that matches or something's broken on our end. At the very end, it catches it and it always sends a text back. Because if you don't get any text back, then what's the point? It's a bad experience. Then with that, you need to be able to explicitly help the person too. So the help check really should happen at the beginning of the chain because there's no point running the rest of your checks against the text message if they've asked for help. So Twilio has a namespaced help. So you can't take help if you're using Twilio. So I've helped me. So you just say help me and it'll send out a message to give you examples and help from there. So before we do anything, we think, how do we extend from here? We have the happy, bad, and sad paths, roughly. We can help people. How do we want to architect this so that I can plug in services really easily? So if somebody at this conference says, I want to be able to do this with this command, I can drop it in a matter of minutes. First, we package everything up into the concepts of services. When I say services, I don't mean different applications on different networks talking over a RESTful API. I mean conceptual services put together with namespaces and concepts. So for example, we have the Twilio service, which all it does is take in a text and a number and send that text to that number. We have the news service, which handles that once we see the news command. And we organize them up with the interactor pattern. So the interactor pattern was first discussed in the Gang of Four designs of coding design patterns in the 1990s. And simply put, you use it as one piece of business logic per class with a single method. This is called call, and you can chain them together, and which works well in this case. We don't actually validate the user, but you run the text in, and you just run it down the chain, and it checks against the text with every single service, and then once it finds a command or some match, it kills the chain, stops, executes the required code, and sends the text. Sweet! We've figured out our design. Let's do another service because that's the fun thing. So what else would be important in a natural disaster? Maybe what's happening in nature. So we're checking on the weather. First, I wanted to have a peek at Weather Underground. It's the last time I'll ever speak about them because I used them for years. They had a fantastic API for developers, loads of awesome information for free, and then they killed it this year, and now it's $400 a month for the same service. Goodbye, Weather Underground. Hello, AccuWeather APIs. Only 50 requests a month, which kind of is not as nice as thousands, but it had a decent API. So we start putting this together. Here's the interactor. By the way, in Ruby, it's popular enough that there's even an interactor gem. You can see I say include interactor there. That helps work even better. So this is where we call and send it to the Twilio text messenger. And here's our weather class. Now there's one extra step we have to do here because we require a path, require a parameter. If there's no parameter, we have to kill it and tell them they've done something wrong. But if there is a parameter, we have to handle that fuzzy life. If somebody says lost Withiel GD, lost Withiel England, lost Withiel United Kingdom, lost Withiel Europe, whatever, we have to be able to process that. So first we send it off to the weather API, to get the location key, which will make all of those different parameters one key. And we grab that key from that request and send it to them again at another endpoint to get the weather forecast. It's very simple at the moment because there's a bajillion things you can put in, and styling is hard, but here is it in real life. And final service here, I'm getting a little short on time, so I'll go a little more quickly. Where am I? So we hooked into the Google Roots API. If you think old school MapQuest, root. And we put that together, enforce 2 parameters, same thing about fuzzy matching. Make sure that if they send the wrong thing without 2 parameters, we fail it. Finally, going forward, we want to expand the weather offerings, allow longer form news articles for select publications. Twilio requires 1,600 characters, so we batch them. Allow community use and input, extend features and commands because I can drop in services 45 or 1,000 like candy, and have a notification capacity if you want rolling news updates for that to be allowed. So wrapping up, I tried to raise awareness today about a problem that I think is out there with networks. As developers, we have to be incredibly conscious of it. I walked through a way that we can find tooling ourselves or use what I've built to interact with the outside world, hook into our servers, hook into APIs when the data is down, when the Wi-Fi is down. But overall moral, I just wanted to show that we all have kind of a superpower if we code or work in product development, and we can, beyond just getting paid by the boss and doing what we have to do every hour of the day, we can actually try and build and create and give things back and share with people. That's why I only ever talk about things I build outside of work. I'd like to encourage you to do the same. Now finally, as I go away, because don't have time for questions, get your phones out, add this phone number to your phone. You can use it and email me anything that's wrong with it or you don't like. But thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure. I look forward to the rest of the conference.